the brains behind the brawn.
Who decides who's going to win and who's going to lose?
Me.
Vince Russo grew up a wrestling fan. In the early 90s he got noticed doing a radio show, and was hired by the WWF to work on the WWF Magazine. The magazine at that time was struggling with its bland presentation, mostly presenting kayfabe storylines and, more importantly, fake interviews with the wrestlers. Vince Russo quickly transformed that, taking it as a personal project to go and personally interview the WWF wrestlers, presenting out of the ring, personal stories on the people behind the characters, and a more real, edgy content. McMahon, seeing the big success of the new format, added another magazine for Russo, the Raw magazine, where Russo often wrote in character, talked about backstage scenarios, and the competition with WCW. With Russo now established as a valuable member of the team on the back of his magazine success, he was invited to sit at production meetings with the most influential people in the company at that time: McMahon, Ross, Patterson, Briscoe, Pritchard, Cornette, etc. Russo, in real life disliking the product presented at that time, called for a more real and modern presentation of storylines, and out of the old wrestling-heavy formula and stereotypical characters. With business declining under the current regime, McMahon started to take notice. This ultimately led to Russo doing what nobody in the company had the vision or balls to do: confronting McMahon face to face, telling him that his product is boring and outdated. McMahon, who was known to put his workers on the spot in similar situations, gave Russo his first big opportunity to make television difference. Co-hosting WWF's morning show, Live Wire, Russo for the first time brought his magazine character to life, Vic Venom. An edgy, honest, unscripted, unapologetic personality, who was pretty much speaking on behalf of millions of fans who wanted a real change in the product. This led to some of the most organic and entertaining segments on WWF TV, with the company getting dominated by WCW, frustrating McMahon and forcing a big change in the old hierarchy. This led to the most important day in Russo's professional life, a day that some egos never recovered from: coming to the office for a creative meeting, with all the usual faces in the room. McMahon stood up, took Russo's magazine, and declared that this is what the WWF product needs to be. Russo started getting more and more involved in the creative process by the end of 1996 to early 1997. Often writing promos for talent and suggesting ideas. By mid-1997, Russo was an official member of WWF Creative, laying the groundwork for the explosion to come, with all the top stars going through major character transformation. The outdated, out-of-touch members of Creative like Cornette and Pritchard were eliminated by late 1997, leaving the winning team of Russo and McMahon without politics and agendas. Vince Russo was writing the shows, formatting them, placing commercial spots, choosing locations for skits, and pre-taped segments, presenting McMahon with a finished product. McMahon then added his 2 cents and the magic was created. There was never any major changes to Russo's initial presentation of the show, as McMahon, despite being a brilliant marketer, was never able to write a show from scratch, segment after segment. Russo built the house, McMahon decorated it. Russo, with his now partner in writing Ed Ferrara, revolutionized professional wrestling television, presenting a never-before-seen product, putting big emphasis on episodic television with cliffhangers, leaving the viewers waiting for next week. Creative skits, segments, storylines, were the major part of the show, developing stories that made even random television viewers wanting to see the conclusion of the conflicts and matches. Russo was often sitting in the crowd during the live shows, observing the crowd reactions and giving them what they want based on TV ratings patterns. The old lazy, bland booking of a show was dead. Nobody in wrestling history invested more time and effort in writing the shows than Russo and Ferrara, often having more than 20 segments a program, and giving everyone on the roster something to do. During that time, Russo wrote, seemingly on a weekly basis, what turned out to be all-time memorable moment, one after another. Thinking outside the wrestling bubble, turning the shows to a pop culture spectacle, as opposed to a niche genre. Russo had the privilege to work with the greatest talent roster of all time, the elite talent the industry has ever had to offer. Which obviously made all of that possible, but where Russo gets his credit, is giving them the creative freedom, the platform to showcase their talent based on their individual personalities. The WWF reached its all-time peak, dominating the cable TV charts every week, producing unbelievable numbers of 8 to 10 million viewers on a weekly basis. Russo and Ferrara put everything into the Raw, and then Raw and Heat shows, focusing on detailed storytelling. This led to a major burnout with Russo needing a break, feeling that he's abandoning his family and putting the wrestling industry as his first priority. McMahon on the other hand, not only didn't allow it, but decided to add another TV show to the weekly schedule, SmackDown. More importantly, expecting the crew to do double the work with the same pay structure. Vince Russo again, like with the WWF Magazine a few years earlier, was a victim of his own success. The crucial meeting that ended the relationship was Russo telling McMahon about his personal problems. McMahon told Russo that he's making enough money and can hire a caretaker for his 3 kids. That was the final straw. Russo and Ferrara jumped to WCW, got unprecedented mainstream coverage, including a full article on Entertainment Weekly. Vince Russo's first regime as head writer from October 1999, produced a more focused and creative product in months. Building around the right people in Goldberg, Bret Hart, Hall, Nash, and Steiner. And giving more prominent positions to less featured talent to show their personalities. Ratings increased with the more compelling product, even with the heavier sports competition on TV, getting very close to some WWF segments than in months prior. It looked like the company were gaining momentum with Russo building the entire program on a main event storyline of Bill Goldberg vs. Bret Hart and the NWO. Luck wasn't on their side, as arguably the most lethal blow the company suffered happened around the same time, with both Hart and Goldberg suffering long-term injuries, taking them off television for months. Russo's last show in the first regime drew a 3.4 rating, the highest rating of his time. Not only producing a great show, but the main event of Bret Hart vs. Nash drew a 4.1 rating, WCW's highest opposed segment in a long time. Politics ran wild in the company, suggesting a creative group to write the show. Russo, who didn't sign for this role, left. And former writer Sullivan replaced him. Sullivan had major heat with big parts of the roster who liked Russo's work. This led to Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Barry Saturn, and Dean Malenko, jumping to the WWF. Ratings went back down. All the positive steps were dismissed. Russo's second run in the company didn't have the same momentum, the talent roster wasn't as good, the creative process with Eric wasn't working. And the biggest factor was the WWF at its pinnacle on the other channel, with Rock at the peak of his popularity, drawing a bigger audience for his segments than anyone in wrestling history. Russo had some entertaining moments as a TV character during that time, with Goldberg and Flair. In 2006, Vince Russo became the official head writer of TNA, a growing company with nowhere near the budget of his 2 previous jobs. Russo worked in TNA from 2006 to 2012, with the ratings increasing every single year of his run, peaking at over 2 million viewers. Part-time owner of the company Jeff Jarrett confirmed that the 2008-2009 period was the most profitable time in company history, debunking baseless claims from con men like Meltzer. Meltzer got worked routinely by shills like Gurnett and Heyman, feeding him their agendas to report. With Russo's success completely destroying his view on what wrestling should be, leaving him bitter, trying to twist and turn numbers to suit his biased view. In the process exposing himself as an agenda-driven mark. Later, Meltzer comically tried to claim that Spike TV didn't renew Impact Wrestling's contract because they learned Russo was working with the company as an advisor, trying to sell the idea that random TV executives are looking to find who writes the show, and not what number of viewers it produces. Meltzer, as usual, hiding behind fabricated sources, got embarrassed and exposed as a liar. Since Russo left, TNA lost more than 70% of its audience, with the product nowhere close to its peak under him. The most successful and greatest talent in history gave him his credit for his incredible and unmatched contribution to his aspect of the industry. Factually proven. The wrestling business was a better and more successful product whenever Russo was writing it. Going down in history as the most successful TV writer in professional wrestling history.
So what is pro wrestling today, that show you watch on television?
This is all about storyline. It's all about characterizations. I like to call it a male soap opera.
Props go out to Vince Russo.